Thank you, everyone. It's great to be back in Amsterdam. It's great to see a lot of familiar faces. Throughout the morning, I'm going to come out and spend a few minutes between speakers and talk about some project highlights and highlights throughout the organization and accomplishments that we've had. And when I say we, I mean really you, accomplishments of the community. Rocky mentioned collaboration with other organizations, and he mentioned two specifically, ONF and the Telecom Info Project. I want to spend a few more minutes and just give you the next mouse click down on that detail. We worked with the leadership of the Telecom Info Project over the last few months, identified the project scopes that they had, and certainly shared our project scope and where we were headed. And in those conversations, we identified that we actually had areas of overlap and opportunities to collaborate. One of our key concerns is that we don't want to ask our community to be involved in several different organizations when it just doesn't make sense. We talk about vanity-free products. We think we should manage our projects in the same way and make sure that we have the communities focused and working on the right things together and not require disbursement across different communities. And one of those areas to work together was really on projects that we've had underway for many years now, our open network solutions. In the last couple of years, we've been working on some disaggregated switch gear that's now being repurposed into cell and gateway solutions. And more recently, we'll talk about that later on this morning, on edge solutions. And so these are three areas where we specifically want to collaborate with TIP and make it easy for our communities to work together. So with that, we actually outlined what that means for both of these communities to work together. And consistent with how we've operated for the last several years, we produce specifications in a collaborative environment. We have suppliers that then build products to those specifications and provide the source code and design files for those, and those products become recognized on our marketplace. We'd like to then take those products and share those with the TIP organization and ask that they put those products into their test labs and their incubation labs that they run in conjunction with the carriers and actually use this hardware as part of their tested configurations. Likewise, they will produce their own specs. They're very specific to work that's going on in their community with the carriers. And similarly, they have some open source projects and specifications, and they're creating design files that they want to share. And so we'd like to be able to leverage that work, not ask the suppliers or the community to repeat that. And so we'll simply share that information and ideally have those products also become a product on our marketplace and achieve that OCP accepted certification mark. So again, the idea of making it easy for both communities to recognize the efforts of each other and work together. So we also, as an example of that, we actually have one of our key suppliers, EdgeCore. They have a booth outside the auditorium here. They've actually been participating with both communities, and we have a product that they have recently launched into OCP that's being shared and shared in that it's being tested by the TIP labs and these incubation labs by the carriers. This is actually the 7316 open cell site router, and I believe they have a sample of that outside. You can stop by their booth. So this is just an example of how we're working with these organizations. Likewise, we have similar conversations ongoing with the Open Network Foundation. And again, the same model. We're going to create the specifications and the products with our hardware community. We're going to share that with the ONF software community. They would like to use those as part of their tests of open systems and their software stack and that open software stack. Their outcome or what they produce is a bill of materials of an open system platform that solves a particular application need. They also document it in reference designs. And as their carriers define their requirements and needs for reference designs, we're asking them to provide that back to us as a set of requirements to let our community then respond to that. And again, the whole idea is that we are creating open hardware platforms that they're able to use in their open software projects. Also want to spend some time talking about some project highlights, and again, I'll do that throughout the morning. There's a lot of project highlights, and I can't even begin to cover it if I had all 2 hours this morning, so I'm not going to even try. The first one I want to talk about is a project within the Data Center Facilities Group. That group has spent about a year and put together some really good information. It was actually a white paper and a checklist, and it listed out what I think of as best practices for operation of a data center, in particular a colo data center. So it addresses the best practices of cooling, electrical distribution, access into the building, the white space itself, even some of the cabling and services within that white space. And the whole idea is that you're driving for the highest level of efficiency and transparency as well, transparency in terms of information of the facility and how you're working. And so that group has come up with this checklist. It's a self-assessment checklist, but it allows colo operators to look at how they're doing and performing in relationship to this best practices document. Those companies that do meet the criteria of this checklist actually receive this OCP-ready certification mark. And I'm pleased to say we have 4 data centers that have already completed the checklist, gone through the peer review, and have received this certification mark. And 3 of those are here in Europe, so that's pretty exciting. I want to move on to another project. It's our Sonic Network Controller project. This project was launched a couple of years ago, an initial contribution from Microsoft, but today we have dozens and dozens of companies that are contributing to this project and the code. We also have a tremendous number of hardware platforms that have now been tested to use the Sonic Network Controller. As of this morning, I got a report from our project lead that we had 92 platforms that are supported today, 23 of those that were added since the March summit. So that's pretty exciting. And just as a project goes, there's a lot of new things that are unfolding. They launched a newsletter to communicate out to a team of now hundreds of people that are involved in literally around the globe. And they added some pretty interesting features, and I actually just had an opportunity to see with that feature yesterday afternoon when they were setting up. And this is the opportunity to do a warm reboot. So they can make a hardware or software modification to a switch and then perform a warm reboot within seconds without having to take the entire switch down. Again, this was demonstrated on an edge core switch, and if you stop by and talk to Lucas, I'm sure he'd be happy to demo that. They're also adding a rich set of telemetry and troubleshooting capabilities, or have added that into the code base. They released a new switch abstraction interface. This is the API interface between the actual switch silicon and the software controller. And again, continually having new releases. So very exciting project, making a tremendous amount of progress along the way. To help identify those platforms, we've actually added some icons to our marketplace. This happens to be an edge core network switch that you can find on the marketplace. And you'll see some new icons along the bottom there. These are icons that represent the software that's been tested or qualified on this particular hardware platform. And so you'll now be able to go to the marketplace, and if you're looking for switches that support Sonic or the SAI API, you'll be able to quickly do a search and select that on the menu and find those switches. I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that this afternoon, or later on from Steve Helvey. Another group that's been pretty active, and Mark mentioned this morning a few minutes ago that talked about the ORV3, Open Rack version 3. This is an initiative that we did announce in the Beijing workshop. This is really a group of engineers that have been working together now for a couple of years. Open Rack being actually the initial rack architecture contributed by Facebook and adopted by other companies. Microsoft and Facebook mechanical and thermal engineers have been working together really to converge the best features that are available, and the intent is that there'll be an evolution to that rack and add some of the capabilities that we see are necessary in the future. Making accommodations for liquid cooling is just an example, accommodations for more flexibility and in terms of the front and the back and so on. So again, they'll appreciate it if you'd stop by and talk to the folks in either one of those booths. Also, Steve Mills is here, and he'll run a workshop and go into more detail on Friday with that. That group's also looking at PowerShelf interoperability, being able to interchange power modules within the PowerShelf. We have 3 different work groups involved in advanced cooling, and again, pretty good progress from all 3 of those. I'm just going to mention a couple. On the cold plate, one of the work groups focused on cold plate technology. They've actually drafted requirements for cold plate technology, and that's headed to our incubation committee for review and approval before it becomes an accepted spec. We expect that to happen anytime. On the immersion side, a lot of work there from the supplier partners and the potential adopters to define the requirements and actually put together a checklist for immersion. And some of this checklist information will actually be fed back into future data center facility plans, so they make sure they're designing the facilities to accommodate this IT equipment of the future. And they're also announcing the availability of a white paper that describes that. So anyway, I'm going to take a break. We're going to come back and talk about projects a little more throughout the morning. But it's really my privilege at this point to introduce our next guest speaker. He is a director in the AI development group at Facebook, and please welcome to the stage Misha Shimlyansky.